Big recruiting weekend for the University of Tennessee as it hosted some commits and several targets, a few for 2025 and a lot for 2026 as Tennessee took down Kentucky. Had a couple of commits heading into the weekend, and we'll touch on that here in a moment. But first, the headliner of the weekend is Tennessee's looking to add a second running back to the class of 2025. A Southern Cal commit was on campus. AP, how did it go for the Tennessee native?
That's right. DeJuan Morris is one that Tennessee's been trying to get up here for a few months now, and it's been tough sledding. But he reached out to Tennessee a few weeks ago after the Alabama game. It certainly feels like things are trending in the right direction. I know Steve Wilhong put a prediction in for him to flip. It feels like Tennessee's got a ton of momentum there. Felt like they had a ton of momentum going in. I think the weekend only added to that. And so, we'll see what he elects to do. But it certainly sounds like he's going to come back up for an official visit at some point, maybe for UTEP or in early December. But either way, Tennessee feels like they're trending in the right direction for DeJuan Morris.
Hey, Austin, let me ask you. Obviously, Morris is a running back. Tennessee's got Justin Baker, who's committed. Baker had flirted with North Carolina and some other schools. Has that all sort of settled down, you think, at this point? And there's nothing else going on there with him, and it's truly two backs Tennessee's looking for in this class?
Yeah, it certainly doesn't sound like anything's going on there, Brent.
Okay.
It feels like things have kind of quietened down on that front a little bit. And let's face it, I mean, there's a lot of strong innuendo out there that Mack Brown, could be retiring at the end of the year. I mean, he admitted he basically almost did after the one loss. And so, I think that's going to keep, prospects from, giving a hard look at North Carolina. And so, I think everything should be fine there. But they want to get a second back in this class. DeJuan Morris, body frame wise, game, just the skill set's very similar to Dylan Sampson. And so I think, watching Sampson do his thing is probably not a bad thing for the Vols when it comes to DeJuan.
Let's go from one Southern Cal commit to another. Tennessee's been in this conversation for linebacker Jaden Perlotte for a long time throughout this cycle. Feels like he's kind of jumped back into the mix here in the closing months before signing day.
Yeah, I mean, he was up for the game. I didn't want to make a big deal about it on the message board just because, we'll see where things go. At Tennessee, all schools kind of handle their NIL stuff, from a budgetary standpoint. And, it certainly felt like Jaden Harmon kind of took Jaden Perlotte's spot when Perlotte chose to go to USC and Harmon flipped from Alabama to Tennessee. And so I'm not going to say he can't end up here, but I think we'll find out how bad Jaden Perlotte doesn't want to go to USC, over the next few weeks, because it certainly sounds like, Tennessee's a factor, but does Georgia get back into the mix? Probably not, but you never know. Where's Auburn at with Perlotte? We'll see where things go down the stretch here. But, he at least visited for the game last week, and his parents looked like they were having a pretty good time. Jaden, much more reserved.
Sorry, Brandon, to cut you off. I mean, how many linebackers can they take here? I know they're holding on like crap for Christian Gass, and a great player they don't want to lose. But you just got to commit a linebacker commit last week.
Yeah.
You have Harmon. I mean, we're talking about Perlotte here. How many can they take?
Well, I mean, Gass has got versatility. I mean, but Gass probably more Leo than he is linebacker, but can play linebacker, right? And so, I'm fascinated to kind of see what they do and how they do it. But you have really, the only person you lose is Peely, and you like your linebackers, T. Lander, and obviously Evan Spillman's going to be a good one. You just got to, get back healthy, and Arion Carter leads that group. So, and Jalen Smith's, played a lot this year. So, and Caleb Perry will be back. I mean, see, that's what I'm saying, which goes back to your point. But, we'll see. Again, I wouldn't pencil or pin him in or anything like that, but it was at least interesting to see that he made it to campus on Saturday.
AP, are you surprised at the amount of, not just with Tennessee, but around the country, at some of the movement, potential movement that we're seeing with the class of 25? Because the notion all summer long is you make your hay and you get to August and your class is built, and then you just kind of hang on to that class and you're starting to work on 26s, 27, or the next two class, whatever those years are. And maybe it's because there's some coaching changes. Maybe it's just because there's some guys that Tennessee has continued to recruit that they're involved in that makes it feel like there's more, quote, flip watch than we've seen. Or am I overreaching there when you look at this thing in this particular class?
Well, I think a lot of schools are putting a lot of stuff in kids' heads to make them, contemplate flipping or taking visits or have a little uneasiness. And I think a lot of it is that house case, because it's like, well, I mean, no matter what kind of agreement you have with the collective at the school, like, what are they going to do if, if the collective goes away and everything's taken inside, or what happens if you have both and you got kids thinking they're going to get paid by the collective and by the school. And I'm sure that in a certain way they will, but like, they're not going to get double dipped, I don't believe. And I don't think schools are, because I mean, the schools got to figure out how to get $20 million right out of their stuff, which is all doable for most everybody. But I don't think that they're going to do all that and then go, oh yeah, hey, major donors, we still need you to chunk over, X $1 million, for NIL again. Like, I think that's more meant to give some relief to those donors. So I think there's just a lot of unknown. And so kids are still fielding phone calls, still taking visits, more so than they have the last couple of years, where once you committed, as you pointed out, kids were kind of done because, the NIL part kind of kept everybody locked in because most everybody had a deal they felt good about.
So this is not a huge leverage game I'm sure there's some of that going on around.
Well, there's that leverage everywhere. I mean, there's leverage going on with every school. So, yeah, I mean, that's, yes, I think it's part, kind of see what you can get and what you can't get. But it's also just some unknown. Like,
gotcha.
I think schools have done a nice job of creating enough doubt there about everything to where kids are just kind of keeping their options open.
To that point, though, and I asked Matt to reiterate this oftentimes on Trail Tidbits. You got Auburn trying to get Smith. You got Georgia trying to get Gash. You got, for the longest time, Bama trying to get Harmon. Like that's the arena you want to be in, because that means you're recruiting the
Absolutely.
right caliber guys. I mean, right?
Yeah, it's like I told the guy on the board the other day. Like, and you don't need to follow recruiting if you can't handle the heat in the kitchen on these type recruitments. I mean, like, this is what you want if you're Tennessee. Otherwise, you're recruiting the wrong kind of kid. Like, you want those teams that you're competing against to have to fend them off for a kid, because that means, look at Arion Carter. What did Tennessee have to do to get Arion Carter fending off Alabama? 2 years later, aren't you glad they fended him off? Or would you rather had like a guy that was much easier and you beat Louisville for him? Now, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that these type wins and even like escapes to hold on to kids are good things, because you're, again, beating out teams that they're afraid to let that kid come to your school because they don't want you to get any momentum. And that's kind of where I think some of this stuff is for Tennessee. By the way, maybe one day I'll get invited to be over there on Matt's recruiting podcast. He's always, he always wants to do it all by himself.
Here's another question too. And I know we're talking generalities. We'll get back to some specifics here, but I wonder, because of what you're talking about, AP, and the arena that you're in, and you're having to fight people off, that it's not just about, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to go so far NIL wise over somebody to get a kid. If we're getting a little more old school recruitment, if relationships are starting to become a more prevalent, or not back it originally was, but the relationship factor in there is carrying more weight than maybe it carried when NIL first came out.
Yeah, I think that for some kids, it just boils down to the dollar. And if whoever gives you 50 cents more, that's where the kid's going to go. But for most, they all know they're going to get paid in some form or fashion. As long as you don't disrespect them, they're going to be good. And then it comes back, again, to quote the great Top Gun Maverick, comes back to the pilot in the box. It comes back to the recruiter. It comes back to the coach and the relationships and the old school stuff that you and I have dealt with for years and years and years. And so, like, again, most of it is going to be apples to apples money wise, give or take, a few $1,000s. then it comes back down to comfort level, relationship with the coaches, relationship with mom and dad, grandma, whoever the champion is in the kids' recruitment, whether that's the high school coach, the 7-on-7 coach, the mom, the aunt, the uncle, whoever, the dad, the grandma, the grandpa. We can just keep naming them.
So you're saying it's not always about
It's
Jerry
not
Maguire,
always
show me the
about money. Yeah, I would tell you most of the time it's not. Now, again, every kid is going to have more than likely have representation. Every kid is going to have that representation pushing for the best possible deal that they can get. But when it comes back down to it, it's still like, well, I mean, I know they're offering me $50,000 more to go over there, but I just don't want to go over there. Like, I really like this place because of Coach X, Y, and Z and the relationships I have with these people. And most of the time, you're going to see them do that, especially if you're winning. I mean, there's a reason Georgia and Alabama, can still kind of. I mean, they're absolutely paying kids, right? Because it's legal. It's what you do in NIL. But does Georgia get a few hometown discounts because they've been winning the last 4 or 5 years? Absolutely, they do.
Yeah,
and winning helps that stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, Pete, let's look at 2026. A couple of these guys you guys have already caught up with, but who were on campus here either last weekend or recently. On3's number one cornerback, 5-star and Albert Hill and Rodney Colton Jr. and some of these other guys. Who were some of those names, and how is Tennessee performing with those guys who have been on campus recently for 2026?
Yeah, Matt caught up with Albert Hill. We'll have a story, coming out. It may have already come out by the time this runs.
It's out.
And then, and then you got Zalis Hicks, safety out of the state of Texas. He could reclassify to 2025, and that'll be interesting to see what he decides to do over the next few weeks. We'll see if he reclassifies or not. If he doesn't, then you'll settle in for a long sled. If he does, then all of a sudden it's going to be speeding up the process. Where's Tennessee standing at? I feel like Tennessee's in a fairly good spot, but again, long way to go with Zalis Hicks. TK Keys, I mean, you're talking about a kid a wide receiver out of the state of Mississippi that is really close with Faison Brandon, has now been here 2 times over the last month, and Tennessee continues to be in a really good spot there. He has told Matt, decision-wise, December, January, maybe February at the latest. So you're rubber's meeting the road for his recruitment fairly soon. You just obviously got a big commitment from Tyreek King last week, and so Tennessee's off to a really solid start in 2026, and they just got to continue to build on it. And of course, you mentioned Rodney Colton, the South Carolina commit linebacker that William Inge has done a really nice job with.
Hey, where is Tennessee? What do you think Tennessee got done with Savion Hitter, the running back that has been talked about coming in for a while and had not been able to get here, but he finally gets here for a visit? AP, where's Tennessee early on in that process? Because I know Michigan, Ohio State, all the big boys are in that one early as well.
Yeah, he knows that he's a priority number one for Tennessee. And so he's excited about, things at Tennessee. Had a really nice time at Michigan the week before for Michigan State. I would tell you, though, that the atmosphere here was more impressive to him and his family than what Michigan was. And so I think the night game was a big deal to him. I think the dark mode was a big deal to him. And his relationship with Darrell Sims and Josh Heupel are probably 2 of his best relationships he has. So he knows where he stands with Tennessee, and Tennessee's right up there near the top for him.
Let's revisit that commit that Tennessee got on Thursday or Friday from local standout Tyreek King. You and I are familiar with this game because he's right here. We've seen him play a couple of times. Feels like this one was this was Kelsey Pope's guy, right? Am I wrong for saying that?
Well, it's the one that Kelsey targeted, a couple of years ago, and he went hard on him. And Tyreek, he took visits. He was at A&M the week before he committed to Tennessee, but I think Tennessee's always been the team to beat for him, and they've done a fantastic job of working that relationship, and getting that one done now I think was big, just because you already have Faison in the boat. Again, you've got a couple of nice pieces to start this class, like a Brandon Anderson. So I think offensively, to get one of your top targets, if not your top target, at wide receiver this early in the game is big.
Any other names in 2026 that Tennessee's made some serious headway with the last week or so?
Yeah, I think if you're Tennessee, you want to get Craig Tutt back up here. Tennessee will not have visitors at this week's game. Tennessee has to give away an SEC game in each season. Mississippi State is that game. Otherwise, it'd be Vanderbilt, like they have, the last couple of times Vanderbilt's rolled into town. So they will not have any visitors, no recruits at this week's game because of the penalties from the Jeremy Pruitt deal. And so, but Craig Tutt, they love to get him back up here for UTEP. Kids, got all kinds of potential. Plays there at Oakland with DeJuan Morris. And so that's one I think Tennessee wants to continue to work on. But, this 2026 class is off to a really good start. And they want to continue to build on it with guys like Leo Delaney and other key players across the board.
Austin, obviously you got to pick your time. It makes sense to pick the Mississippi State game as a game that you don't have any in for because of what you've been able to do the last 3 weeks at home with Florida, Alabama, Kentucky. Yep. Tennessee, to me, feels like they took really good advantage of that October slate of night games and that 3:30 game against Alabama. They made hay. They made the most out of those 2 weeks. Fair?
No, that's totally fair. And they had to, Brent. They were behind the 8 ball because of this weird schedule. They didn't have any quality home games early. You have a quality home game until October 12th, but then you go checkerboard, checker kneeling, orange out, smoking cigars after the win, and then dark mode. Yeah. And so that's a great 3-week stretch with a bye week, kind of penciled in there too. But a great 3 straight home games to get a lot of prospects in town for. And again, they'll try to get, Kendra Harrison in for the UTEP game. They were hoping to get him in this past weekend, but he had already set up a visit. Once he had to cancel because of a death in his family.
For the Alabama game, right?
For the Alabama game, then they tried to get him in for Kentucky, but he already had a visit to Miami on the books, and so he wasn't going to cancel on them. So he went down there. They hope to get him up here for the UTEP game.
So glad you kind of brought out the orange out and the dark mode and all that checker, because I thought from a operation standpoint, from a game day ops and all that, the games were good. Tennessee won, rivalry wins and all that, but they were exciting games. The atmosphere was incredible, and just it was a show the other night before the game started. With the band and the lights, and that has got to be so freaking cool for the 16, 17, 18-year-olds that are here in house. That leaves an impression. Not only that, but obviously the football game as well.
Yeah, and the word is they're working on a drone show. They'll fly over the river and spell out Hubbard.
No, there's no drone shows allowed on that deal, so don't get that one started. But no, I do think you have to give a credit to game operations and the creativity. Think about what Tennessee got out of last week. Let's take the win out of the equation.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's what you're supposed to get. But look how much national buzz they got from their creative side of things for the whole unveiling of dark mode on Monday.
Yeah.
They got 3 days. They got 2 or 3 days of just people talking about, retweeting. And they had millions of impressions on that video they put out, which was really well done. And then you couple that with your relationships, get a bunch of good players on campus, and then you give them a good show. You give them the light show, you give them the theatrics and everything to go with it. So that was a great way to close out their 3-game recruiting streak, if you will, or run that Tennessee needed to do because of the show that they put on, in addition to going out and winning a football game. AP, I got one other thing here too for you on recruiting. As we move into November here, when does the transfer portal chatter really get going? And I asked that for this reason. In previous years, you got 4 teams in the playoff, and everybody knew who 3 of the 4 was by this point, pretty much, right?
Yep.
So now you got everybody else is kind of out. November didn't really matter to them. They were going to some bowl game somewhere, but it wasn't to go play for a trophy, so to speak, or a championship. Does the portal talk slow in any way in November because so many teams are still relevant in the hunt? Or does the portal talk just become that much more of a distraction because guys who are on teams in the hunt are really looking around and you start to get a lot of wind of guys going in the portal? How do you think that is managed and plays out in November? Because to me, it feels like it could be different than it's been the last couple of Novembers.
I think it'll be somewhat different, but at the same time, I think there's going to be so much chatter behind the scenes about potentially X, Y, and Z going out there and going in the portal, that I think schools will start to do their due diligence. Because I mean, you start hearing about this guy and that guy, and so then you just start watching. You get on. They all have that access to that video thing. They all sit there and pull up, every snap a kid plays. So I mean, like they're able to start. Okay, let's start evaluating in case this happens, and go from there. And yeah, I mean, I do think it has the possibilities to be different in some form.
I was just curious, like, is it going to be? I don't think it's going to be less kids go in, but is it going to happen? Is the rush going to happen later?
I think the rush could happen later. I do think that. I mean,
let's talk about guys going in the next couple of weeks from those teams that are still in hunt. Now, teams that are lower level teams and all those types of things, that's a different deal. I'm just curious if you think that it changes with some of the Power 4 teams, that those teams are still legitimately in the potential playoff race.
Yeah, I think the ones that are at least in the conversation, will slow some things down. But for others, it'll still be the same. To me, the same mode as last year.
Gotcha. I was just curious. I think that's that thing's always evolving. So what that looks like is, and of course, the rules change all the time too, right?
That's right.
Window. No, we're not going to do a spring window. Wait. Yeah, we are going to do a spring window. No, yeah. Okay, yeah, I think we're going to.
And don't forget that window shrunk a little bit this year, right? I mean, it went from 45 to 30 days. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it went from not being able to leave after spring practice to now you got a window where you can leave, which, again, for coaches changes how you manage your roster through spring ball, what that looks like in the wintertime, and all those things. And, again, that could change. You never know when rules change because it's kind of wild right now with all that takes place. So going to be interesting to see what it looks like with this current class, what the portal looks like. But, again, Austin, I'm just Tennessee's done a nice job of getting guys on campus. They had a good summer of getting guys on campus, and they certainly had a good month of October. They get this class of 26 off to a good start.